When I found my daughter-in-law's phone ringing that autumn morning, I never could have imagined that the small device held the secret that would destroy my entire family. Trembling, I looked at the illuminated screen and saw a picture of my husband, dead for more than 5 years, smiling next to a message that read, "Thursday, same time, I can't wait to see you again." It was as if the world stopped spinning and the air in my lungs froze. But before I continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. That Tuesday morning had started like any other. The fall colors in the Colorado Rockies were painting the mountains with golden and reddish hues, and the cold breeze announced that winter would soon be knocking at our door. Mary, my daughter-in-law, had come over for breakfast with me, as she did every Tuesday since Robert's death. It was a tradition she kept religiously, something I had always interpreted as a gesture of compassion, a way to not leave me alone in this house that was too big for a 68-year-old widow. "I'm running to the grocery store quickly, Ruth," she said after coffee, picking up her purse. "I need to pick up a few things for dinner tonight. Do you want me to grab you anything?" I shook my head, thanking her for her kindness, as I always did. Mary was almost too perfect. Her hair was always styled, her makeup flawless even for a simple breakfast, and her clothes looked straight out of a magazine. My son Thomas was so lucky, I always thought, or at least that was what I believed. 15 minutes after she left, I heard the sound, a persistent buzzing coming from the side table near the front door. She had left her cell phone behind. It was none of my business, of course. I never was one to pry into other people's lives, much less someone's privacy. But the phone rang again, more insistently. Mary must be expecting an important call, I thought, walking toward the table to check. It was then that I saw it. Robert's face illuminating the screen. My husband, dead for more than 5 years, was right there, alive on my daughter-in-law's cell phone screen. And it wasn't an old photo, taken when he was still alive. It was Robert in a blue shirt that I had never seen, in a place I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. The previous message read, "Thursday, same time, I can't wait to see you again." The world around me started to spin. I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins as my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. How could there be a recent photo of my dead husband? How could he be sending messages to Mary? Was it some kind of sick joke? I shouldn't do it. I knew I shouldn't. Respect had always been a pillar in my life, but something stronger drove me. I unlocked the phone. Mary always used my grandson's date of birth as the password, something I had observed countless times. The messaging app opened, revealing a long sequence of conversations with someone identified only as R. I started scrolling, my hands shaking, my heart hammering in my chest as if it wanted to escape. "Thanks for yesterday. You are incredible. I miss your touch. Is Thomas getting suspicious? We need to be more careful. The old lady doesn't suspect a thing. She was never very smart. The old lady, me, they were talking about me." I kept scrolling up to older messages. 2 years of conversations. 3, 4, 5. The first messages dated back to 6 months before Robert's death. My husband and my daughter-in-law, the man I loved for 4 decades and the woman my son adored. The reality hit me like a punch to the gut. They were having an affair. Robert and Mary were having an affair. But that didn't make sense. Robert was dead. So who was sending these messages to Mary? Who was using my husband's photo? I scrolled even further up, looking for answers, and found pictures. Dozens of them. Robert and Mary together, hugging, smiling at the camera. In some, I recognized the setting. It was our old farmhouse, the one Robert claimed to have sold years before he died. In others, they were in a cabin I had never seen. The dates on the photos made me gasp. The most recent one was from only 1 week ago. A wave of nausea washed over me. It wasn't possible, unless... It was then that I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Mary was back. Quickly, I placed the phone exactly where I had found it and returned to the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. I took a deep breath, trying to control my face, my hands, my breathing. I couldn't let her realize that I knew, not until I understood what the heck was going on. The door opened. "Ruth, I think I forgot my cell phone here," she called out with that perfectly polite voice. "It's on the side table," I replied. amazed by the calmness in my voice. As I heard her footsteps approaching the kitchen, I tried to process the whirlwind of thoughts. My husband had an affair with my daughter-in-law, but he was dead. So who was impersonating him? Who was using his picture? And why was Mary still responding as if it were really him? "Oh, it's here," she said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with the phone in her hand, smiling that perfect smile that now looked like a grotesque mask. It would be a disaster to be without it today. I observed her face, looking for signs of nervousness, of guilt, of anything that would betray the secret I now knew. But there was nothing. Mary was a perfect actress. "Are you sure you don't need anything from the grocery store?" she asked, putting the cell phone in her purse. "I'm sure," I replied, trying to smile. "Drive carefully." As soon as the door closed behind her, I collapsed onto the kitchen chair. The world I knew had just crumbled. My husband, the man I shared an entire life with, had betrayed me with my own daughter-in-law. And now, years after his death, someone was continuing this sick game. I needed to discover the truth, no matter how painful it was. I needed to know who was behind this, for myself, for Thomas, for our family. But how to start? Who to turn to? Who would believe an elderly widow with an absurd story about messages coming from a dead man? I was alone in this search for the truth. But one thing I knew for sure. Next Thursday, I would find out who was meeting Mary, and then finally, I would understand what had happened to my family. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Robert's face on Mary's phone screen haunted me every time I closed my eyes. How had I not noticed anything all these years? They were right under my nose the whole time, and I, blind with trust, never suspected. Thursdays. That was when Robert said he went bowling with his friends, an activity he started shortly before he got sick. "It's good for me, Ruth," he used to say. "The doctor told me I need to move around more for my heart." And I, like the devoted wife I always was, just smiled and wished him a good time. Now it all made sense. There was no bowling. There was Mary. There was betrayal. The next morning, my son Thomas called. His voice sounded tired, as it always did in recent years. After Robert's death, he had taken over managing the ranch, a responsibility he never truly wanted. "Mom, I'm going to pick up some documents at Dad's office. Do you need anything from the city?" I hesitated for a moment. Could I tell him what I discovered? No. It would be premature. I needed concrete proof, not just messages on a phone I saw without permission. "No, sweetie, I'm fine." When I hung up, an idea occurred to me. Robert's office. If there was any more evidence about this case, it would be there. He was always methodical. He kept everything. Maybe there was something that could help me understand who was impersonating him now. I went down to the basement where the office was. Thomas rarely touched his father's personal things, preferring to use only what was necessary to manage the ranch. The rest remained untouched, like a dusty shrine to a life that no longer existed. The key to the bottom drawer was still hidden behind the picture on the wall. Robert was always predictable with his hiding spots. Inside the drawer, I found what I expected: organized folders, old documents, some letters. Nothing incriminating at first glance. But then, hidden under a pile of bank statements, I saw a small wooden box I had never seen before. My heart raced as I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were photographs. Not the family photos that decorated our house, but images of Mary and Robert together, in a rustic cabin overlooking a lake. Hugging, smiling, happy in a way I hadn't seen Robert in years before his death. On the back of each photo, dates were written in his handwriting. The most recent was from 3 weeks before his death. At the bottom of the box, I found an envelope. Inside, a deed. The cabin on Lake Placid had not been sold as Robert told me. He kept it a secret, a love nest for his rendezvous with Mary. I wanted to scream, to break things, to burn those photos. But the pain transformed into something colder, more calculated. I needed to know who was continuing this charade, who was impersonating my dead husband. I put everything back, except for one of the photos which I slipped into my pocket. Evidence. For myself, so I wouldn't doubt what I had discovered, in case the grief tried to convince me that it was all just a terrible hoax. When Thomas arrived a few hours later, I managed to maintain my composure. I watched him as he searched for the documents he needed, wondering if he knew. Was it possible that my own son knew about his wife's affair with his father? No, I couldn't believe that. Thomas was always honest, upright, just like Robert used to be, or so I thought he was. "Did you find what you were looking for?" I asked when he finished. "Yeah, just some old deeds," he said. "We're thinking of selling that lot on the north end, you know. We're not using it, and the offer is good." I nodded, as if I cared about land lots and business at that moment. "Mom, are you okay? You look distant." I forced a smile. "Just a rough night's sleep. You know how hard this time of year is for me?" It was October, close to the anniversary of Robert's death. Thomas nodded, understanding. How easy it was to lie when people already had a ready-made explanation for your behavior. "Mary sends her love," he said as he prepared to leave. "She's tied up with a landscaping project for the Smith family. That's why she hasn't been over as much." More lies. She wasn't coming over because she was busy meeting the ghost of my husband somewhere. After Thomas left, I decided I couldn't wait until Thursday. I needed to go to the cabin now, to see with my own eyes this place that had been the setting for so much betrayal. The address was on the deed I found. Lake Placid, about 40 minutes driving from here. I took the keys to my old Chevy and left before I lost my nerve. The road to the lake wound through pines and mountains, gradually moving away from civilization. The kind of place where secrets can flourish without witnesses. When I finally found the property entrance, marked only by an unidentified mailbox, my stomach was tied in knots. The cabin was exactly like in the photos. Small, rustic, with a porch facing the lake. It looked like it was straight out of a postcard. The kind of place where lovers come to escape the world. The kind of place my husband chose to betray everything we built together. There were no cars parked. Apparently, no one was there. I approached slowly, ready to invent an excuse in case someone showed up. I climbed the porch steps and looked through the windows. The inside was spotlessly clean and organized. It didn't look abandoned, but there were no obvious signs of recent occupation either. I tried the door. It was locked, as I expected. I hadn't brought the cabin key, if it was even among Robert's things. For a moment, I considered breaking a window, but that would give away my presence. I needed to be more cunning. I circled the cabin, looking for another entry, and found a window in the back that seemed less secure. With a little pressure, it opened. I didn't recognize myself in that moment. Ruth Thompson, 68 years old, breaking into a property like a criminal. But I had already crossed so many lines since I saw that message on Mary's phone that one more wouldn't make a difference. The cabin's interior was surprisingly cozy. A small living room with a fireplace, a modest kitchen, a bedroom with a double bed made up with linens that seemed too expensive for a place like that. Everywhere, there were signs of recent occupation. A half-finished bottle of wine in the kitchen, current magazines on the coffee table, a woman's jacket thrown over a chair. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and found clothes, men's and women's clothing. Among them, I recognized some of Mary's clothes, and then I froze. Hanging on the men's side of the closet were shirts I instantly recognized, Robert's shirts. Not just similar, but exactly the ones he used to wear. Even a blue plaid shirt that I myself had bought him for our last Christmas together. How was that possible? I was sure all of Robert's clothes had been donated after his death. I myself had sorted everything, crying over each piece as I placed them in boxes. With trembling hands, I touched the familiar fabric. The sensation awakened memories. Robert wearing that shirt while chopping wood. Robert smiling as I adjusted the collar. Robert? Robert lying, betraying, destroying our life together. Something caught my eye on the nightstand, a flipped-over photo frame. I picked it up and felt my blood run cold. It was a recent photograph, no more than a few weeks old, judging by the autumnal foliage visible through the window in the background. It showed Mary smiling, hugging a man who looked impossibly like Robert. Older than when he died, with more wrinkles around his eyes, more gray hair at the temples, but undeniably Robert, or someone who could be his identical twin. But Robert didn't have brothers. He was an only child just like me. There were no close relatives who could be mistaken for him. So, who was this man, and why was he impersonating my husband? The sound of a car approaching pulled me out of the trance. Someone was arriving. In a panic, I placed the photograph back exactly as I had found it and ran toward the living room. Through the window, I saw an unfamiliar car parking. A man got out, his back to me, carrying grocery bags. I couldn't be seen there. I ran to the back window where I had entered and slipped out as quietly as possible. I circled the cabin, staying low, and managed to reach my car unnoticed. With my heart racing, I drove back up the dirt road until I was at a safe distance. I stopped on the shoulder, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold the steering wheel. What I had seen defied all logic. A man who looked like Robert, wearing Robert's clothes, living a secret life with my son's wife. As I tried to regain my composure, a terrible possibility began to form in my mind. What if Robert wasn't really dead? What if his whole death had been staged? But no. I saw him in the casket. I touched his cold hand. I watched as they lowered his body into the grave. Unless it wasn't him. I felt the world spin around me as the truth began to take shape, a truth more terrible than anything I could have imagined. The next morning came without me having slept a single minute. I spent the entire night turning the last 5 years over in my mind, examining every detail, every memory of the days preceding Robert's supposed death. He had died at home of a sudden massive heart attack. I was in the city running errands. When I returned, I found him collapsed in the office. It was Mary who called the ambulance while I, in shock, held his cold hand. Mary, who had coincidentally stopped by to drop off some documents Thomas had requested. Mary, who managed the entire situation with an almost clinical efficiency while I fell apart. I remembered the funeral, the closed casket. He wouldn't like people seeing him like that, the funeral director had said. At the time, it seemed sensible. Now it sounded like part of a terrible conspiracy. A fixed idea began to take hold of me. I needed to see Robert's grave. I needed to be sure there was something, or someone, actually buried there. I dressed mechanically and took the car keys. It was early, the sun had barely risen, and the road to the cemetery was deserted. Dew still covered the gravestones when I parked and walked to the place where my husband was supposedly resting. Robert J. Thompson, 1950 to 2020, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. I stood there, looking at the cold marble, feeling like a fool. What did I expect to find? A vacant grave? A note saying, "I fooled you"? The truth is, even if I wanted to, I couldn't just dig up the casket to verify its contents. On the way home, I decided to take a detour. I parked in front of the police station of Chief Miller, a man we had known for years. If there was anyone I could trust in this town, it was him. Miller received me in his cluttered office, offering me coffee in a mug that desperately needed washing. "What can I do for you, Ruth? Problems with the ranch?" "Actually, it's something a little unusual," I began, not knowing exactly how to explain. Hypothetically speaking, how would someone go about, faking their own death? Miller raised his eyebrows. "That's a very specific question to be hypothetical." "It's just curiosity," I lied, trying to sound casual. "I've been reading a lot of mystery novels lately." "Well, it's not as easy as the movies make it look," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "You need a death certificate, which requires a corrupt or deceived doctor. You need a body or a convincing explanation for the absence of one. And then you have the whole issue of documents, Social Security, identity." "But is it possible?" "Possible? Yes. Easy? No way." He studied me attentively. "Ruth, are you sure everything is all right?" "Yes," I replied hastily, getting up. "Just research for a book club." "Thanks for your time, Chief." Leaving the station, I knew I was about to cross a dangerous line. What I was about to do would put me at risk, but I saw no alternative. I needed to know the truth. At the hardware store, I bought a small wireless security camera, the kind used to monitor vacation homes. The salesman explained how to set it up and connect it to my phone. It wasn't exactly James Bond, but it would serve my purpose. In the afternoon, I returned to the cabin. The car I had seen the day before was no longer there. Moving quickly, I entered through the same back window and installed the camera in a discreet location in the living room where it would have a good view of the entrance and part of the interior. The battery would last about 48 hours, enough time to find out who would show up on Thursday. As I was leaving, I noticed something I had overlooked in my rushed visit the day before: a small medicine box in the bathroom cabinet. Heart medicine, prescribed for a certain James Sullivan, a pseudonym so close to Robert J. that it seemed almost insolent. I returned home with a growing certainty that I was about to discover something terrible. On Wednesday, I received a call from Thomas. He and Mary were coming over for dinner the next day, Thursday. A chill ran down my spine. "What time are you planning to come?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Around 7 o'clock, if that's okay with you." 7 o'clock in the evening, which meant Mary's secret rendezvous would be earlier. What if the man who looked like Robert was planning to come to dinner too? Would they be that brazen? Or would she just make an excuse to leave later? "Sure, I'll prepare something special," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. I spent that night compulsively checking the camera app on my phone. Nothing yet. The cabin remained empty and silent. On Thursday morning, I received a notification. Someone had entered the cabin. With trembling fingers, I opened the app and saw the images. It was Mary, carrying a small suitcase. She moved through the cabin with the familiarity of someone who was home, arranging flowers, lighting candles, setting the stage for a meeting. About an hour later, the door opened again. The man who walked in made my heart stop. Tall, gray-haired, a walk that I would recognize anywhere. If it wasn't impossible, I would swear it was Robert. Mary ran to hug him, kissing him deeply. They talked for a few minutes, but the camera's audio was too weak to capture their words. Then, hand in hand, they headed to the bedroom, out of the camera's range. I felt nausea rise in my throat. Even after seeing the messages, the photos, a part of me still hoped there was some innocent explanation. Now there was no way to deny it. But who was that man? Why did he look so much like Robert? And what was Mary's role in all this? I needed to confront them. I couldn't keep living with these doubts, consuming me from the inside. I took my car and drove to the cabin, determined to finally discover the truth, no matter how painful it was. When I arrived, I saw Mary's car parked next to a pickup truck I didn't recognize. For a moment, sitting in the car, I considered calling Thomas or Chief Miller. But what would I say? That I suspected my dead husband was having an affair with my daughter-in-law? They would think I was completely crazy. No, I would need to face this alone. I got out of the car and walked to the cabin. I could hear soft music coming from inside. Frank Sinatra, Robert's favorite music. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might rip through my chest. With one last moment of hesitation, I knocked on the door. The music stopped abruptly. Silence. Then approaching footsteps. The door opened, and there he was, the man from the photographs, the man who looked so much like Robert that, for a hallucinatory moment, I believed my husband had returned from the dead. But looking closer, I noticed small differences. A scar on his right eyebrow that Robert didn't have, slightly deeper wrinkles around his mouth. His hair a darker shade than Robert's. His face went pale when he saw me. It wasn't the reaction of a stranger surprised by an unexpected visit. It was the look of someone who saw a ghost. His ghost. "Ruth," he murmured, his voice almost identical to Robert's, but with a slightly different intonation. He knew my name. Before I could answer, Mary appeared behind him, wearing only an oversized shirt, one of Robert's shirts that I had recognized in the closet. Her face transformed from surprise to horror when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think I should be asking that question," I replied, surprisingly calm. "Who are you?" I directed the question to the man. He opened his mouth to answer, but Mary interrupted him. "Ruth, you have to leave. Now. This is not something you want to know." "Actually, it's exactly what I want to know," I said. "I'm tired of lies. Who is this man, and why is he wearing my dead husband's clothes? Why is he impersonating Robert?" The man and Mary exchanged glances, a silent communication that only increased my fury. "It's better if you come inside," he finally said, stepping aside. I walked into the cabin feeling strangely disconnected from reality, as if I were attending a play where I had suddenly become an unscripted character. "I'm going to get dressed," Mary murmured, disappearing into the bedroom. I was left alone with the stranger who had my husband's face. He watched me with a complex expression: fear, guilt, something akin to compassion. "Who are you?" I repeated. "My name is Richard," the low voice replied. "Richard Thompson. I was Robert's twin brother." I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Impossible. Robert had no brothers. He was an only child. Richard gave a sad smile. That's what he always said, wasn't it? Robert was always good at reinventing his past as needed. I knew his parents. They never mentioned another son. Why didn't they know? He sat down on the couch, gesturing for me to do the same. I remained standing. We were separated at birth, closed adoption. I grew up in Houston with my adoptive parents. I only found out about Robert 6 years ago. A year before Robert's death. The chronology fit, but it was all so absurd that my mind struggled to process it. "How did you find him?" "I didn't find him. He found me." Richard took a deep breath. "I had cancer. I needed a bone marrow transplant. Doctors suggested searching for biological relatives. When the search results came back, I discovered I had an identical twin brother, Robert." Mary returned, now fully dressed, her face a mask of forced calm. "You guys met," I continued, trying to put the pieces together. "And then what?" "Robert sought me out," Richard continued. "At first it was incredible, finding someone so similar to me, not just physically. We had the same gestures, the same tastes. Even our medical histories were similar." "Except for the cancer?" I observed. "Yes, except for that. We talked a lot on the phone. We started visiting each other. That's when I met Mary." I looked at my daughter-in-law, who was pale but held her chin up. "You betrayed my son with the uncle he didn't even know existed?" "It's not that simple," she replied, her voice cold. "Then explain it. Make it simple for me." Richard shot a warning glance at Mary. "We'll tell her everything. She deserves to know." Mary crossed her arms, but nodded. "Robert donated marrow to me," Richard continued. "He saved my life. But while I was recovering, something changed in him. He started talking about how dissatisfied he was with his life, how he felt he had made wrong choices, married the wrong person, chosen the wrong path. I felt a sharp pain in my chest at those words. Robert had never shown dissatisfaction with me. At least, I thought he hadn't. He had a wife, a son, a grandson, I argued. A ranch he loved. How was that the wrong path? Richard looked genuinely uncomfortable. I can't explain his feelings. I only know what he told me, that he felt trapped, that he wanted freedom. "And then he met Mary," I concluded, the pieces finally fitting together. "His own son's wife." Mary stepped forward. "I didn't plan to fall in love with Robert. It happened. Thomas and I had already been distant for years. We were staying together only for William. We started an affair," she continued. "We met here, on Thursdays. And then you decided to get rid of him," I said to Richard. "Fake his death, assume my husband's identity, so you could keep his woman." Richard shook his head vehemently. "No, it wasn't like that. I wasn't even close by when Robert died. I was in remission, but still recovering in Houston." "So he really died?" The question came out as a whisper. "Yes," Mary replied. "Of a heart attack, exactly as you think, only it wasn't as sudden as it seemed." "What do you mean?" Mary took a deep breath. "Robert had been planning to leave us, to leave you, Thomas, the life he had. He wanted to sell the ranch, start over somewhere with me." The betrayal was so deep I could barely breathe. "And what happened? Did he change his mind?" "He had the first minor heart attack while he was with me," she continued. "We managed to hide it. The doctor said he needed to reduce stress, take his medication, but he became obsessed with the idea of leaving soon. He said life was too short." "Then he started planning an exit," Richard interrupted. "He sought me out again. He proposed something absurd, that I assume his identity after he died. He said he had a substantial life insurance policy that he could split with me. I refused, of course," he continued. "I said he was crazy. I said if he wanted to leave his family, he should just file for divorce like a normal person. But Robert, he didn't want to deal with the scandal, with dividing assets. He just wanted to disappear and start over." "But he died before he could do that," I concluded. Yes, Mary confirmed. That day, he really did have a heart attack, only he wasn't taking his medication correctly, maybe on purpose. I'll never know. I felt nausea rise in my throat. You found him dead? Yes. He had called me earlier saying he wasn't feeling well. When I arrived, he was on the office floor. He was already gone. A terrible thought occurred to me. Could you have saved him? If you had called for help immediately? Mary averted her gaze. The answer was clear in her silence. And then? Then I panicked, she said. I knew if they investigated, they could discover our affair. So I remembered his plan, Richard's. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar that it made my heart clench. Mary called me weeks after the funeral, he explained. She told me about Robert's plan, about the life insurance. I still refused. I didn't want to participate in that craziness. But then what? Then my cancer returned, he said simply. Stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months, a year at most. No hope of a cure this time. But that was 5 years ago, I observed. Yes. I participated in an experimental clinical trial. It worked better than anyone expected. I've been in complete remission for 4 years. When Richard got better, Mary continued, we decided to give what Robert had planned a chance. Not for the money, but because we fell in love. I looked at the two of them, unable to comprehend the audacity. You betrayed my husband with my son. Then you betrayed my son with my husband. And now you're betraying my son with my husband's twin brother, who no one knew existed. Mary had the decency to look ashamed. I don't expect you to understand or forgive. And the life insurance? Where did that go? It's in a frozen account, Richard responded. We never touched it. I know it seems impossible to believe, but we didn't do this for the money. Then why? For a second chance, he said simply. For Mary, for me. After almost dying twice, you see life differently. And what about my son and my grandson? Don't they deserve a second chance too? A life without lies? Mary looked at her own hands. I'm going to leave Thomas soon. I've already started preparing the ground. An amicable divorce, shared custody of William. But you're not going to tell him about Richard? About Robert? No. She looked me directly in the eyes. And I hope you won't tell him either. It was an absurd request. How could I keep such a monstrous secret? How could I look my son in the eyes knowing what I knew? But then I remembered Robert, the man I thought I knew for 40 years, the man who apparently lived a double life for years, planning to abandon me, fake his own death, and start over without looking back. Had it been that easy for him? That easy to discard decades together? Did Robert ever love me? The question escaped before I could stop it, exposing my vulnerability. Richard looked genuinely concerned. I can't speak for his feelings. I only knew him for a year before his death, but he spoke of you, with respect. Respect, not love, not nostalgia, not regret. Respect, like one talks about a competent coworker. He had been unhappy for years, Mary added, in a misguided attempt to soften the blow. He said you two were together out of habit, not love. Her words hit me like a slap. I had loved Robert every day of our life together, even in the hard times, even in the fights, even on the long, silent nights. I always loved him, and all that time for him, I was just a habit. Are you going to the dinner tonight? I asked Mary, abruptly changing the subject. She blinked, confused by the shift. Yes, I'll be there at 7 o'clock with Thomas. And afterwards you'll come back here with Richard? She hesitated, then nodded. Thomas has an early meeting tomorrow in Denver. He'll be spending the night there. William is staying at a friend's house. I plan to come back here afterwards. The calculating coldness with which she planned her betrayal sickened me. But then, who was I to judge? I had been equally blind, equally foolish. I need to think, I finally said, getting up, about all this. Richard and Mary exchanged glances again, that silent communication that excluded me. Whatever you decide, we will respect it, Richard said. I just ask you to think about the consequences for everyone involved. I left the cabin without answering. My mind was a whirlwind. In the car, I finally let the tears come. tears for everything I had lost, for everything I never truly had. Robert never loved me the way I loved him. He planned to abandon me. And if he hadn't died, he would have disappeared from my life, leaving me forever with unanswered questions. I was the fool in this story, the naive old woman everyone deceived. I drove back home mechanically, preparing for the dinner I would have to face in a few hours. A dinner where I would need to look my son in the eyes, knowing what his wife was doing behind his back, knowing that in a matter of days his life would be turned upside down. As I prepared the meal, an idea began to form in my mind, a terrible idea, born of pain and rage. If I couldn't have justice, maybe I could have something else. In the kitchen cabinet, behind the canned goods, was the old bottle of sleeping pills, strong pills that the doctor prescribed after Robert's death when sleep eluded me, pills that, in sufficient quantity, could make someone sleep forever. I held the bottle in my trembling hands, considering grim possibilities. Would it be that easy? A few pills in Mary's wine, an accidental overdose, sadness, but no surprise. After all, she had been so troubled lately. I opened the bottle, pouring some pills into my hand, small, white, harmless. They could solve everything. They could avenge me against Robert, against Mary, against all the lies. But then I thought of Thomas, of William, of their lives after another tragedy. I thought about the kind of person I would become if I followed that path. With a trembling sigh, I returned the pills to the bottle and the bottle to the cabinet. No, that would not be the kind of justice I sought. I would not stoop to that level. At 7 o'clock sharp, I heard Thomas's car arriving. I forced a smile, preparing for the performance of my life. I opened the door to my son and my daughter-in-law, watching as Mary maintained the perfect smile, as if she hadn't been in another man's arms just a few hours ago. "Mom, are you okay?" Thomas asked, worried. "You look pale." "Just a little tired," I replied, leading them to the dining room where the table was set. I had a hectic day. During dinner, I observed them. Thomas, kind and clueless as always, talking about the ranch, about plans for the future that would soon be destroyed. Mary, elegant and controlled, responding at the right moments, smiling at the right moments, the perfect actress. And I, the foolish widow who was finally seeing the truth. "How are things between you two?" I asked abruptly, interrupting Thomas in the middle of a story about the new tractor. He looked confused by the interruption. Mary froze momentarily, a glass of wine halfway to her mouth. "How do you mean, Mom?" "The marriage. You two. You seem to hardly see each other lately." Thomas shrugged uncomfortably. "We're fine, busy, but fine. Right, honey?" Mary smiled that perfect smile. "Of course, just normal phases of any marriage." "And are you happy, Thomas?" I insisted. "Truly happy?" My son looked at me with growing concern. "Mom, what's going on? Why these questions?" I looked directly at Mary as I answered. "I just want to make sure my son is living the life he deserves, with someone who truly loves and respects him." Mary held my gaze, but I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew I was issuing a warning. "Of course I am," Thomas replied, oblivious to the tension between his mother and his wife. "I have everything I need." He took Mary's hand across the table, a gesture that was probably natural for him. She smiled, but I saw how her fingers barely returned the touch. The dinner continued, the conversation diverting to safer topics. When we finished dessert, Thomas announced that they needed to leave. He needed to wake up early for the trip to Denver. "Mary, could you help me with the dishes before you go?" I asked. "Thomas, why don't you check that porch faucet I mentioned? It's leaking again." My son nodded and left, leaving me alone with Mary in the kitchen. As soon as we heard the front door close, she turned to me. "What did you decide?" she asked, her voice low and tense. I started quietly stacking the plates. "You know, for years I believed I had a perfect marriage, that Robert and I were happy, that I knew the man I shared my life with." "Ruth, but it was all a lie," I continued, ignoring her. "He never loved me the way I loved him. He was with me out of habit, and he planned to abandon me." Mary remained silent, waiting. "I'm not going to tell Thomas about you and Richard," I finally said. nor about you and Robert, not because you deserve my discretion, but because my son doesn't deserve that kind of pain." She let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," I replied, facing her. "I'm going to let you tell him about the divorce your way. I'm going to let you build whatever narrative you want to explain why you're leaving your marriage. But if you hurt my son more than necessary, if you try to take William away from him, if you cause any scandal that affects his reputation in this town, I will tell everything, every sordid detail, understood?" She nodded, pale. "Perfectly. And as for Richard," I felt a knot in my throat, "tell him to never, ever cross my path again. Seeing his face is like seeing a ghost that reminds me of every moment I was deceived." "He'll understand," she whispered. Thomas returned at that moment, interrupting our conversation. "The faucet is fine now, Mom. Just needed a little tightening." "Thanks, honey." I forced a smile. As I walked them to the door, my heart ached for what was to come. Thomas would soon lose his wife. His world would be shaken. But he would survive. He was stronger than I had been. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" Thomas asked at the door, worried. "You look different today." "I'm just tired," I repeated, hugging him tightly. "I love you, son, more than anything." "I love you too, Mom." Mary gave me a quick, mechanical hug, avoiding my eyes. I watched them get into the car, driving away, the last glimpse of the couple they pretended to be. When I went back inside, the house seemed emptier and quieter than ever. For 5 years, I had lived with the memory of a man I thought had loved me. Now, even that had been taken away. There was nothing to remember fondly, nothing to comfort me on lonely nights. I sat in Robert's chair in the office, looking at the photos of our life together. Every smile, every moment I believed was special, every anniversary, vacation, Christmas, all lies? Or was there truth hidden somewhere among the falsehoods? Perhaps I would never know. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I didn't cry for the loss of Robert. Instead, I cried for the loss of the woman I had been, trusting, loved, secure in her place in the world. That woman had died today, in the cabin by the lake, and in her place someone new was born, someone wiser, more cautious, someone who would never be deceived again. A week later, as promised, Mary told Thomas about the divorce. He showed up at my door that night, eyes red, face downcast. "She said she doesn't love me anymore," he murmured, sinking into the sofa. "She said we've been living a lie for years, that she doesn't want to waste her life anymore." I poured him a generous dose of bourbon, the same kind his father used to drink. "I'm so sorry, son." "Did you know? Did you realize something was wrong?" I hesitated. What could I say? I suspected she wasn't happy. But no, I didn't know this was coming. "She wants shared custody of William. She said she's moving to San Francisco, that she has a job opportunity there." He gulped down the bourbon. Who just decides to move to another state like that, out of the blue? Someone who had been planning it for a long time, I thought. Someone who already has a life waiting for them there. "What are you going to do?" He shook his head, lost. "What can I do? I can't force her to stay. I can't force her to love me." And William? How is he dealing with this? Upset, confused, Mary talked to him earlier today before she talked to me. He laughed bitterly. "She had everything planned. When I get home today, she'll already be gone. She's spending the night at her sister's house in Sacramento. At least that's what she said." At her sister's house. Or at the cabin in Richard's arms. Rage bubbled up inside me, but I suppressed it. My son needed support now, not more pain. "You can stay here tonight if you want. Your old room is always ready." He nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Mom. I don't think I could sleep in that house today." That night, I heard Thomas pacing the hallway, restless, just as he used to be when he was a teenager, and something was bothering him. I thought about Mary, probably in Richard's arms now, planning their new life together. I thought about Robert, who had died still planning his escape, and I thought about myself, carrying the weight of those secrets forever. In the following weeks, I watched my son navigate the painful divorce process. Mary kept her word. It was fast, amicable, with no scandal. Thomas kept the house. She took her share in dollars. shared custody of William, with the boy spending most of his time with his father, as Mary would be settling in San Francisco. She left on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after I discovered the truth. She came to say goodbye, a gesture I considered more a performance for her imaginary audience than genuine courtesy. "Goodbye, Ruth," she said at my door, perfectly composed as always. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me," I replied coldly. "Just go, and don't hurt my family anymore." She nodded, a flicker of guilt finally breaking through that perfect facade. "Thomas and William will never know the truth. I will keep my word." I watched her car drive away for the last time, feeling a strange relief. One part of the lie was finally over, but the secret would continue with me forever. Thomas and William moved into my house in the following weeks. "Temporarily," my son said, "until we get used to the new situation." But I knew it was more than that. Their house was full of memories, of voids left by Mary's departure. Seeing my grandson every day was a balm for my wounded soul. He was 13 now, the age when boys start pulling away from their grandmother's hugs. But occasionally, he still let me hug him, especially on difficult days. "Why did Mom leave?" he asked one night while I was helping him with his math homework. How to answer that? Sometimes people change, William. They make difficult decisions that even they don't fully understand. She said she still loves you, that nothing will change between us, and she does love you, I'm sure of that. It was one of the few certainties I had about Mary. Her love for William seemed genuine, even if everything else was a lie. "I'm going to San Francisco next month. During summer vacation, she's already looking at schools for when I go to live with her part-time." I nodded, feigning support. "It's going to be an adventure." "Grandma," he hesitated, his young face worried. "Mom said she has a friend there, a special friend. I think that's why she left." I felt my heart clench. What else did she say about that friend? "Not much. Just that they've known each other for some time and that one day she's going to introduce me to him." He frowned. "Do you think she cheated on Dad?" The innocent question caught me off guard. How I wished I could protect him from the harsh adult truth. "William, relationships are complicated. Sometimes good people make wrong choices. But the important thing is that your parents love you, no matter what happens between them." He seemed to accept this vague answer, returning his attention to the homework. But I knew this wouldn't be the last time we faced this issue. A month later, I received a call from Mary. It was the first time we had spoken since she left. "William is coming to San Francisco tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Thomas is putting him on the plane. He'll stay with me for 3 weeks." "I know." There was an awkward pause. "Richard and I thought it would be better to postpone the introduction. William needs time to adjust to the separation before meeting another person in my life." "Wise of you," I replied, not hiding the sarcasm. "Ruth," her voice lowered, "I want you to know we're moving. Further away. Richard got an offer in Phoenix. We'll be more than 5 hours from San Francisco." "And William, the shared custody?" "It will continue as agreed. I'll make the trip when it's his turn to stay with me. It's better this way, less chance of complications." Complications. Such a polite word to describe the possibility that someone might recognize Richard as Robert's identical twin. "How is Thomas?" she asked, with what seemed to be genuine concern. "How do you think? Devastated, confused, trying to figure out where he went wrong in a marriage that, as far as he knew, was just going through a rough patch." She sighed. "I know you'll never believe it, but I really do care, and I never wanted to cause so much pain." "But you did anyway." Another silence. "You're right, and I'll have to live with that." She hesitated. "Just one more thing. Robert's death anniversary is coming up. As always, we're going to visit the grave. Richard wanted to know if it would be too painful for you if we left flowers too. From a distance, of course, after you and Thomas have left." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. "You're asking my permission for my husband's secret twin brother, who you're cheating on my son with, to leave flowers on the grave of the man who betrayed us all." "Forget it," she murmured. "It was a silly idea." "Mary," I said, before she could hang up. "One last question. Did you ever truly love Thomas?" "At some point." There was a long pause. In the beginning, yes. He was kind, stable, everything I thought I wanted. But then I met Robert, and it was different, more intense, more real. She sighed. I don't expect you to understand or forgive. I just hope you find peace someday. She hung up, and I was left staring at the silent phone. Peace, as if that were possible now. On Robert's death anniversary, Thomas and I visited the cemetery as we always did. We brought flowers, lilies, his favorites, or at least the ones I always believed were his favorites. Now I doubted even that. We stood in silence in front of the headstone. What was really beneath that cold stone? The body of the man I loved and who betrayed me, or someone else, part of a scheme that never existed beyond Robert's sick imagination? After Thomas walked away to wander around the cemetery, a ritual he had developed in recent years, a private moment to communicate with his father, I was left alone with the headstone. You lied to me for our entire life together, I whispered to the cold marble. You made me believe in a marriage that only existed in my head. You made me believe I was loved, when in reality, I was just convenient. The tears came not from sadness, but from rage. Rage for all the wasted years, for all the moments I thought were special and which meant nothing to him. But you know what? I survived. I survived your betrayal, your death, the truth. And I'm going to keep surviving. For Thomas, for William, for me. Thomas returned, eyes red from contained tears. I hugged him, feeling his large body tremble slightly. I never understood why he was so distant sometimes, he murmured. Why it seemed like there were parts of him I could never reach? Because there were, I thought. Parts he saved for Mary, for his secrets, for the life he planned to have far away from us. He loved you in his own way, I replied, the lie bitter on my tongue. One more lie to protect my son. When we returned home, we found a wreath of flowers on the front door, red roses, Robert's favorites, as I well knew. No card, no identification, but I knew who had sent them. How strange, Thomas commented. Who would have sent them? Probably someone from town, I replied, picking up the arrangement and putting it aside. You know how people remember him this time of year. That night, after Thomas and William went to bed, I took the roses and carried them to the backyard. One by one, I ripped off their petals and threw them into the fire I lit in the old metal drum. I watched them burn, feeling each flame as a small vengeance against everyone who had betrayed me. When the last petal turned to ashes, I felt something shift inside me, a closure finally closing, a wound cauterized. Robert was dead, whatever the truth about his life was. Mary was far away with her lover, living the consequences of her choices, and I was here, on the ranch I helped build, with my son and my grandson, rebuilding a life from the pieces left by others. In the following months, life assumed a new normal. Thomas slowly began to recover, dedicating himself to the ranch and to William. The boy went back and forth from San Francisco as agreed, always returning with stories about his mother's new life, but never mentioning any special friend. Eventually, Thomas met Sophia, the new science teacher at William's school. She was different from Mary in every way, warm, open, unpretentious. I watched their relationship slowly blossom with the caution of someone who has been deeply hurt. Do you think I'm moving too fast? Thomas asked one night, after mentioning that he had invited Sophia over for dinner with us. No, I replied honestly. I think you deserve to be happy, and she seems like a good person. Different from Mary, he murmured. Yes, different from Mary. I hesitated, then added, Not everyone is capable of loving the way we deserve, Thomas. That doesn't mean the problem is ours. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, for years I blamed myself for Mary's distance. I thought I wasn't good enough, that I didn't understand her enough. Now I realize that some people simply aren't made for love and loyalty. How I wished I could tell him he was right, that Mary had never been truly capable of love, that she had betrayed not only him, but all of us. But I kept my secret, as I had promised. Sophia is coming for dinner tomorrow. I hope everything is okay. Of course it is, I smiled. I'll prepare that pot roast you love so much. Dinner with Sophia was pleasant, natural. She was an intelligent and kind woman, the kind who spoke to adults and children in the same respectful manner. I watched how she interacted with William, how she made him feel heard and important. "Your family is wonderful," she said afterwards, while I served coffee on the porch. Thomas had gone inside to help William with a model for science class. "Thank you. They are my life." She smiled, a genuine smile, with no calculations behind it. "Thomas talks a lot about you, about how you've been his refuge, especially since the divorce. He told me about Robert, too, about how he died suddenly. It must have been terrible for you." I looked at the distant mountains, bathed in the setting sun. It was. Losing someone you love always is, but over time you learn to live with the pain, with the truth, no matter how difficult it is. Sophia seemed like the kind of person who would never lie like Mary, never betray like Robert. Part of me wanted to warn her, to protect her from what I knew about the fragility of relationships, about how people can hide entire parts of themselves behind smiles and promises. But she would need to discover that for herself, in her own way. One autumn afternoon, almost 1 year after discovering the truth about Robert, I received a letter. The envelope had no return address, but the stamp was from Phoenix. Inside, a brief note. "Ruth, Mary wanted me to write to inform you that William met me last summer. She introduced me as a friend, nothing more. He didn't notice any resemblance to Robert, probably because he was very young when he passed away. She also wanted you to know that we understand and respect your decision to keep our secret. I know I didn't do anything to deserve your discretion, but I am eternally grateful for it. Finally, I wanted to tell you that, although I never truly knew Robert, I always felt there was a void in me that was only filled when I found out about his existence. I wish the circumstances had been different, that we could have been a real family. Richard." I stared at the letter for a long time, emotions warring inside me. Rage, sadness, a strange compassion for this man who was and was not my husband. Finally, I did what had to be done. I tore the letter into tiny pieces and burned them, just as I had done with the roses. One more chapter closed. That night I dreamed of Robert, not the Robert who had betrayed me, but the man I thought he was all those years. In the dream, we were young again, dancing at the old barn party where we met. He was smiling at me, that smile that always made me feel like the only woman in the world. "Were you real?" I asked in the dream. Did that man I loved truly exist? The dream Robert just kept smiling, twirling me in the dance without answering. And perhaps that was the hardest truth to accept. I would never know. I would never know if our entire marriage was a sham or if there were real moments of love amidst the lies. I woke up with tears in my eyes, but also with a strange sense of peace. Perhaps it no longer mattered. The past was buried, along with all its truths and lies. What mattered was the future I still had ahead of me. 2 years passed. Life on the ranch assumed a new rhythm. Thomas and Sophia married in a simple ceremony in our home's gardens. William, now 15 years old, was a young man divided between two worlds, the quiet life on the ranch with his father and new stepmother, and the visits to San Francisco and occasionally Phoenix to see Mary. He rarely talked about those visits when he returned, and I never pressed him. Part of me feared what he might eventually discover. Would he notice Richard's resemblance to the photos of Robert that still adorned our house? Would he ask questions for which we wouldn't have honest answers? One summer evening, as we were preparing dinner together, William finally brought up the topic I feared so much. "Grandma, do you know Richard?" My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral as I continued chopping the vegetables. "Richard? Who is Richard?" "Mom's boyfriend. They've been together for some time. I thought maybe you knew him. Before." I chose my words carefully. "No, honey, I never met any of your mother's friends in Phoenix. He's nice to me. He knows a lot about the ranch, actually. He says he grew up on a farm in Texas." Another lie, I thought. Richard Sullivan had grown up in Houston, according to his story. One more layer of falsehood in a life built on deceit. "Mom looks happy with him," William continued. "Happier than she was with Dad, I think." People change, William. They find what they need at different times in life. The words came out bitter, but I tried to soften them with a smile. It's weird, but... He hesitated. Sometimes when I look at Richard, he reminds me of someone. I can't quite place who. I froze. Really? Who knows if it's just one of those random resemblances? Maybe. He shrugged, losing interest in the matter. Can I call Clara to come over tomorrow? We promised to work on the science project together. I breathed a sigh of relief at the change of subject. Of course you can. That night I couldn't sleep. William's words echoed in my mind. He was starting to notice the resemblance. It was only a matter of time until he made the connection. What would happen then? Would he confront Mary? Richard? Would he talk to Thomas? The truth I had guarded so carefully for years could explode at any moment, causing even greater destruction than if I had revealed it from the beginning. The next morning, I woke up determined to do something about it. I couldn't allow William to discover the truth on his own, without context, without preparation. It would be too devastating. I waited until Thomas and Sophia left for the city and William was at a friend's house. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number I had never used, but that Mary had left for emergencies. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Ruth, did something happen with William? No, he's fine, but we need to talk. About Richard. Silence on the other end. Then a sigh. What happened? William is starting to notice the resemblance. He told me last night that Richard reminds him of someone, only he can't quite place who. It was to be expected, she replied, her voice surprisingly resigned. He's growing up, observing more, and the photos of Robert are everywhere in your house. What are we going to do when he realizes? When he asks why his mother's boyfriend looks exactly like his dead grandfather? We've already thought about that, she hesitated. Richard and I, we have a story ready. What story could possibly explain that? The partial truth, that Richard is a distant relative of Robert's, a second cousin I met by chance in San Francisco. The resemblance is explained by the kinship, and no one needs to know about the affair, about the complete truth. And you think he's going to believe that? That Thomas is going to believe it? Such a convenient coincidence? What alternative do we have? Telling the whole truth now would only cause more pain. It would destroy the image William has of Robert, the memory Thomas keeps of his father. What for? She was right, as much as I hated to admit it. Revealing everything now after so much time would do no good, only more pain, more confusion. You should have thought of that before, I said bitterly. Before bringing Richard into William's life, before risking this whole situation. I know, but I can't change the past, Ruth. I can only try to do my best now. I hung up without saying goodbye, the frustration consuming me. I was trapped in a web of lies that I hadn't created, but of which I was now an accomplice. 2 weeks later, Thomas walked into the house with an expression I hadn't seen since the divorce, a mixture of shock, confusion, and rage. Mom, his voice trembled. Mary called. She wants to bring her boyfriend to meet the family on William's next visit. She says it's serious between them, that they might get married. I felt the blood run cold in my veins. And what did you say? What could I say? William seems to like the guy, and she has the right to move on. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so similar to Robert's that it made my heart clench. It's just strange, you know, to think of her with another man. I know, honey. I placed my hand on his shoulder. When are they coming? Next month for William's birthday. She wants us to be civil, one big, happy, dysfunctional family. He laughed without humor. A month. I had 1 month to prepare myself for the inevitable. To officially meet Richard Thompson, my dead husband's twin brother, the man who was now with my son's ex-wife. Are you okay with that, Mom? I know it must be weird for you, too. Sure, I lied. Like you said, everyone moves on. In reality, I was terrified. How would I react to seeing Richard in person again? How would I manage to maintain my composure, pretend I was meeting him for the first time when his face had haunted me for years? When the day finally arrived, I spent hours mentally preparing myself. I rehearsed smiles, handshakes, polite conversations. anything to avoid the collapse I feared. William was excited about his 16th birthday, running around the house checking the preparations for the small party. Thomas and Sophia were in the kitchen finishing the cake. I was on the porch trying to calm my nerves when I heard the car arriving. The silver sedan parked, and Mary got out first, impeccable as always. And then he got out. Richard, older now, grayer, but still impossibly like Robert. He was wearing a simple blue shirt and jeans, the kind of clothes Robert wore on weekends at the ranch. My stomach churned at the sight. William ran to hug his mother and shake Richard's hand enthusiastically. Thomas appeared at the door, took a deep breath, and walked out to greet them. Sophia was right behind him, silently supporting him. And then it was my turn. "Ruth," Mary said formally, "this is Richard Sullivan. Richard, this is Ruth, Thomas's mother." Richard extended his hand, his face a mask of polite indifference, as if we were indeed meeting for the first time. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Thompson. Mary and William talk about you a lot." I shook his hand briefly, feeling as if I were in a surreal nightmare. "Welcome to our home." His eyes, Robert's eyes, met mine for a moment. Was there a silent plea for forgiveness there, or was it just my imagination desperate for some sign of remorse? Thomas looked at Richard with curiosity, but without recognition. Why would he? The last time he had clearly seen his father, Richard was weakened by cancer, much thinner and paler than Robert had ever been. "Let's go inside," Thomas finally said, breaking the tense moment. "William is anxious to open presents." The afternoon unfolded like a play where everyone performed carefully rehearsed roles. Mary, the cordial ex-wife; Thomas, the mature ex-husband; Sophia, the understanding new wife; Richard, the polite new boyfriend; I, the welcoming hostess. Only William was genuine, moving between all of us with the energy of his 16 years, oblivious to the underlying tension. At one point, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Richard. He was washing some glasses while I put away food leftovers. The silence was deafening. "Are you okay?" he finally asked, his voice low so no one would hear. "What an absurd question," I replied without looking at him. "How could I be okay with all this?" "I know it's difficult, for all of us." "For all of you?" I turned, unable to contain the rage. "You and Mary chose this. Thomas, William, and I are just trying to survive the consequences of your choices." He lowered his head. "You're right. I have no excuses to offer." He hesitated, then continued, "But I want you to know that I take good care of Mary and of William when he's with us. I know it means nothing to you, but I'm trying to be a better man than my brother was." "You didn't truly know Robert," I replied coldly. "You don't know what kind of man he was." "I know enough." His eyes, Robert's eyes, met mine again. "I know he betrayed you, betrayed his own son. I know he planned to abandon you all. I know he didn't value what he had. And are you so different, getting involved with your nephew's wife?" He had no answer for that. We returned in silence to the living room, where William was enthusiastically opening his presents. I observed Thomas during that afternoon, looking for any sign that he noticed anything strange about Richard. But he seemed genuinely oblivious, treating Mary's new partner with polite distance, nothing more. When the party ended and everyone was getting ready to leave, Thomas surprised everyone. "Mary, Richard, could you stay a little longer? There's something I'd like to discuss." My heart pounded. Did he know? Had he discovered something somehow? Mary looked equally alarmed. "Sure, Thomas. What's going on?" He looked at William, who was talking animatedly with Sophia across the room. "It's about William, the school actually. I got a call from this counselor yesterday." The relief was immediate. It was just about William, about school, nothing about Richard, about secrets, about past betrayals. As the three of them talked about William's grades, his plans for college, his recent teenage rebelliousness, I observed Richard. He was completely at ease, giving his opinion on education, on discipline, as if he had every right to participate in those family decisions, as if he were part of the family. And then something terrible occurred to me. He was part of the family. In a twisted, perverse way, Richard was as connected to us as anyone. Robert's blood ran in his veins. He was Thomas's uncle, William's great-uncle, a Thompson, even if he carried another last name. When they finally left, I felt as if I had survived a natural disaster, exhausted, trembling, but intact. "Mary's boyfriend is a decent guy," Thomas commented later as we cleaned up the house. "Older than I expected, but he seems to treat her and William well." I replied vaguely. "It's funny," he continued. "There's something familiar about him. I can't quite place what." I stopped what I was doing, alarmed. "Familiar how?" Thomas shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe it's just the way he talks. He reminds me a little of Dad, actually." "All men of a certain age sound alike," I replied quickly, "especially the ones from the country." He laughed. "I guess so. Anyway, it's good to see Mary happy, and it's good to see William adjusting well to the whole situation." That night, before sleeping, I reflected on the strange family we had become, connected not only by blood and marriage ties, but by secrets, by shared lies, by buried truths. Richard and Mary would never just be my daughter-in-law's ex and her new boyfriend. They were the guardians of a truth that could destroy everything Thomas and I struggled to rebuild after the initial betrayal. And me? I was the only bridge between those two worlds, the only one who knew the whole story, the full extent of the betrayal and the lies, the only one who carried the weight of all the secrets. It was a heavy burden for a 70-year-old woman, but as strange as it was, it also gave me a kind of power. The power to protect my family from the cruel truth, the power to allow Thomas and William to preserve their memories intact, the power to maintain the fragile peace we had built on the ruins of so many betrayals. I closed my eyes, imagining Robert, the real Robert, not the idealized version I cherished for so many years, nor the monstrous version revealed by recent discoveries. Just Robert, the fallible, complicated man who was my husband, who was Thomas's father, who made devastating mistakes and died before he could correct them or make them worse. "Rest in peace," I whispered in the darkness, "whoever you truly were." Now, if you liked this story, click to subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll see you there.